We are the Community Diversity Group. Our mission is to foster an inclusive and interactive community which attracts and retains a pool of potential employees and residents from underrepresented groups. We accomplish this in many ways, including sponsoring events like the Community Resource Fair, publishing a monthly resource flyer, and providing public training and educational and networking events. You can find us online at communitydiversitygroup.com.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
Please join me in the Pledge of Allegiance.
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, I'd like to welcome everyone who's here this evening, as well as those of you who are viewing from home. I'd like to announce the board held an executive session September 19th regarding personnel, negotiations, real estate and safety, and prior to this meeting on safety and negotiations. Board members with an agenda before you, are there any changes to the agenda? Okay. At this time, Mr. Johnson will review some housekeeping items related to our hybrid format.
Thank you, Hammer. For our audience this evening, 30 minutes will be provided at the beginning of the meeting for public comment for items related to board business that you are not on the action items portion of the agenda. If additional time is necessary, the board may consider reopening public comment after board business is completed or during the next meeting. Each individual will be limited to comments of up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to the board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. For action items, public comment will be held just prior to voting on that item as required by the school code. This approach also allows for comments to be informed by the presentation and board discussions of the respective item. Since this is a public meeting, we will not permit remarks regarding individual students. If you'd like to share something with our board about individual students, please email them. During the meeting, the IT help desk is available if those viewing remotely encounter technical difficulties. You may email IT support at scasd.org or call 814-231-7743.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll have a roll call of board members present.
Dr. Anderson?
Here.
Dr. Bader?
Here.
Ms. Brandt?
Here.
Dr. Beck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes?
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Here.
Dr. Duffy?
Here.
Beth?
Here.
And Ms. Sidney? Here.
Okay, thank you. At this time, we'll have our superintendent's update.
All right, I have 2 items for you. Congratulations to Cindy Surgeon, our home and school visitor, who leads our district family intervention team. Cindy recently received a 2022 Paving the Way to Educational Success Advocate Award at Pennsylvania Department of Education Conference for her work as a district homeless and foster care liaison. This is a huge honor for Cindy, and it reflects the outstanding assistance she and social worker Morgan Pechtel provide to district students and their families to meet their basic needs. Another item is in the latest niche.com rankings. We fared very well, particularly with the quality of our teachers. In Pennsylvania, we were 13th out of almost 500 school districts for the best teachers. Nationally, we placed 126th in the top 1%. In the best places to teach category, we came in 6th in Pennsylvania and 60th nationally. Overall, we're 14th out of 495 Pennsylvania districts and in the top 2% of districts nationwide. Now we realize that school district rankings can vary from one company to another, but I'm especially proud to see our faculty's excellence recognized so highly. Day in and day out, they do a wonderful job. As always, we strive to be better and use these numbers as motivation for future success.
Thank you, Mr. Johnson. Jackie, do you have any legislative matters?
Yeah, just a few. So the state legislature has been pretty quiet, as we expect before the election. But I did want to mention that free breakfast started today in the district and across the state. And also which is great, but the problem with that bill is that it expires at the end of the year. I'm sorry, it wasn't a bill, but so we only have free breakfast for the rest of the year at this point. So Representative Kincaid and Senator Williams have introduced HB 2829 and SB 1327, which is titled the No Student Should Go Hungry Universal School Meals legislation. And these bills would provide free breakfast and lunch to every child in Pennsylvania. It would create a special fund that would dedicate $275 million to feeding Pennsylvania kids. And while that sounds like a lot of money, it is only 0.006% of our state budget. As Senator Williams said in the press conference, this is something we can do right now that would have a huge impact on families across the Commonwealth. At the press release, Deanna Philpott, who's a board member from North Hills, also spoke. She's also a school wellness consultant. And I'm just going to take a minute of your time to quote some of her speech because it was really helpful for me to understand the importance of school lunch. So she talks about how universal free lunch and breakfast in schools can have benefits to individuals, there are benefits to families, there are benefits to school districts as well as communities. And she says that restructuring the way our school meal program is funded would provide opportunities for school districts to form partnerships in our own communities. It would provide the opportunity for a new vision for our school cafeterias. No longer would district food directors and staff have to act as salespeople or restaurants focused on revenue. They would no longer need to structure their school menus around the kids' foods items they know will sell and be wary to try new things. In a world with universal school meals, the school cafeteria becomes another classroom where nutrition, gardening, and sustainability can be taught. Food service directors can be educators, taste testing new healthy local produce can flourish, introducing our kids to ingredients they may never experience at home. Our farms would thrive, our students would thrive, and our communities would thrive. So if you would like to get on the No Child Should Go Hungry Universal School Meals legislation bandwagon, please feel free to reach out to your state representative and or senator to let them know you support this legislation.
Thank you, Jackie. That's, I think, really important points about how that would affect the way that cafeterias can operate without the financial pressures of having to sell food that kids might want to eat that might not be the best for them. So. Laurel?
Is it the end of the school year or the calendar year?
The current free breakfast program exists through the end of the school year.
Thanks. Okay. All right. Center Region Council of Governments. Is there a report from Gretchen and Peter?
So I have 2 items, and then do you have an item as well?
We'll do the SPPA later.
Later, okay. So then I just have 2 items. So the first is I wanted to notify our board about a lunch and workshop. So there was a presentation at the General Forum, and it was an update about the activities of the Center Region Anti-Bias Coalition, a committee of CCU. And during that presentation, members were invited to lunch and learn workshop to be conducted in November. And I'm telling our board about this because I think that someone from the school district, or more than one person, I'm not sure, but might want to participate in this. And so I want our board to be aware of it. So when we can figure that out later, but just so everybody has a heads up that this is happening. And so throughout the workshop, additional detailed information will be provided on how elected officials can work with community members on DEI initiatives within, for us, it would be within the school district. Additional goals of the workshop include connect officials from various municipalities and SCASD to each other and the Anti-Bias Coalition so that they can share ideas and develop networks of resources for growing DEI work in their communities. facilitate space and support for leaders to look at their demographic data, current opportunities, challenges, and perceived roadblocks to growing DEI, and to help them identify action steps they can take in the coming weeks and months, and reconvene on a regular basis, perhaps quarterly, to keep the connections growing and help participants keep sharing their progress, additional roadblocks that they encounter, and then as they take action. So I will get more details on this, but with all the things happening in SCASD, I thought this is really something that SCASD would want to participate in, and that the other municipalities would also benefit from SCASD participation. So more on that later, but that's coming up in November. And then the second item is that we're probably all aware that there was redistricting that occurred, and so we have 2 new senators that are, one is, Chris Dush is representing Bellefonte, or State College Borough, Harrison College, and of course, everybody but Bellefonte in that group is in SCASD, and then also Pennsylvania Senator Wayne Langerhol, representing Patton, Ferguson, and Half Moon. And so because there's 2 new senators because of the redistricting, the COG is holding a meet and greet and to meet these new senators. And it just seemed really efficient that if SCASD has anybody in amongst our elected officials, meaning our board members or administrators who would like to come and meet them, then on Tuesday, December 6th at 6 p.m., that opportunity will be with Chris Dush, and Wednesday, December 7th at 6 p.m. with Wayne Langerhol. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of those 2 events. Thank you.
Great, thank you. I think we should definitely look to participate in those as well. Okay, anything else from the COG report? Peter, that's it? Okay. All right, I see Isabella Caceres is on, our student representative, is on the Zoom. Do you have anything to report from the student perspective? And if you don't now, we could revisit this at a future meeting, so no pressure.
As of right now, no. What I will say is that many students are very excited for the pre-breakfast, and I know that me and Tobias and also my team of students have been working hard to make that as accessible as possible to all students. And as of right now, that's the only point of note. So thank you all.
Great, thank you. And if you have any comments on any of the items as we're moving through the agenda, feel free to raise your hand, of course. Okay, so at this time, we have public comment on our agenda. As noted before, each individual is limited to up to 3 minutes as time permits for items related to board business that are not on the action items portion of the agenda. Is anyone here to make a public comment? Yes, if you would like to come up to the podium here, and if you could just introduce yourself and your relationship to the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes to speak.
Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, you can hear me all too well, probably. My name is Mark Levy. All my kids went to SCASD and have the fondest memories of that time. And I see some of the teachers here too. And I wanted to make a very quick comment. I heard that there has been a decision made that no final exams to be administered in math. And I'm only expressing my opinion in math. This is my 5th year as a department head here at Penn State. So I kind of feel that I have a stake in, I see students, come from.
In math?
In math, yeah, I'm the department head in math. And I realize that this decision has been made with the kindest, noblest intention to spare stress. But I feel that there are cons that outweigh this pro, and let me just quickly list them and get out, or get away from the podium. I don't want to take too much of your time. Number 1 is psychological reason. It's only delaying the stress of life. A student, imagine a student who comes to, say, Penn State or to another university in another town, and they have to take an exam, and a lot more hinges on that exam. If they mess that up, their money, they paid for the course is gone. Their parents are not nearby. All their friends who were next to them here are not there. It's a huge stress. And by contrast, here they have teachers who like them, and the friends and the parents hopefully like them, right? So that's one reason. Psychologically, I think it's not a good decision. And I hope it can be reconsidered. I mean, I know that people have the best interests of students at heart, and it's maybe easy to overlook this aspect. And another thing, it deprives students of the realistic assessment of their knowledge. And the third reason is that mathematics, at least, is not easy to separate into different pieces. And a comprehensive exam is much better to test because there are different working parts, and you put them into one machine, and then you see how this whole machine works. And if you take midterms but not the final, you are deprived of that bird's eye view of the picture. So that's my 3 minutes.
Okay. Well, thank you for your comments.
Thanks.
And
I don't know if it's a reversible decision or not.
if you left your email at the sign-in? Okay, thank you, and then we could get back with you. Thank you. Yep. Anyone else here to make a public comment? Yes, if you'd like to come to the podium and introduce yourself and your relationship to the district, and then you'll have 3 minutes as well.
First, my name is Dick Anderson. I've been here before, and I won't belabor my points. But first, I'd like to thank the board for serving the community. I'd like to thank Amber Concepcion and Curtis and Danielle Yoda for taking my calls. That was very productive for me. I have ongoing concerns that I expressed last time, and I really would like to meet individually or collectively with members of the board, which was told that there are those opportunities at coffee hours or open houses. I don't know what you call them technically, but when they are, I would really like that and would look forward to it. But just as a summation, just to let everyone know once again what my concerns are, and I've been in the community for 44 years, and I've had kids, my own kids and grandkids in the school. So I know a little something about it, not as much as you folks, but I am really concerned about the possibility of trans athletes. I'm concerned about sexual orientation. I'm concerned about CRT. I'm concerned about drug and alcohol education. I'm concerned about school safety. I'm concerned about the terms diversity, inclusion, and equity, and really what they mean to all of us in the community. And I'm also very much interested in transparency, how it exists, and how you folks envision it. I think those are all important topics, at least to me, and I look forward to the opportunity to discuss them with you in the future. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I think we'll probably be planning more board coffees in the future. And I think did you leave your email address as well? Yes, thank you. Great. Is there anyone else here to make a public comment or in attendance virtually who would like to make a public comment? Okay. All right, then we'll move on to routine approvals. I'd like a motion to approve the routine approval listing as presented on the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, that was Peter and Carlene?
Yep.
Okay. Yes, I'm sorry, I should have mentioned this before. If everyone could just state their last name when they make a motion, since we have Annette standing in for us this evening, so, yeah. All right, so there's been a motion and a second. Any discussion or questions on these items? Or any public comment on these items? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote.
Ms. Zidney? Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brand?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
And Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that item has passed. Under action items, the first is a motion to approve the 2023-2024 new courses as shown in attachment 6A.
Vader, so moved.
Huff second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on the new courses? Okay. Is there any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll.
Well, the only thing I was going to say is just, there was a mention about the changes at sixth grade, and I noticed that our communications team put out a little piece just today about some of the new revamps in sixth grade. So if any community members are curious about what that entails, there's more information on the website.
Yep, good point. Okay, we'll have a roll call on that item then.
Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brand,
Yes.
Dr. Beck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes. Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
Yes.
Ms. Sidney.
Okay, that item has passed. Item B is a motion to approve the ELA curriculum scope and sequence revisions as shown in attachment 6B.
Vader,
Duffy, so moved.
Vader, second.
All right, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? And we had gone through this in CCL committee as well. Okay. Any public comment? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brand,
Yes.
Dr. Beck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Yes.
Sidney. Yes. And Dr. Anderson.
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item C is a motion to approve the IB career program reconsideration that is shown in attachment 6C.
Huff so moved.
Buck, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions and discussion on this item? Laurel?
Yes, this had come up in May when we were asked about, because we have to approve courses that run with fewer than 12, I believe, students. And it was requested that we not run it this year. As part of that request, it also said that, requested that we stated that we discontinue this program. And in the discussion then, what really came out was that, oh, thank you very much, that we wanted to, the sense of the board was that we wanted to, given all that happened with pandemic and all, to give it another chance to see if students would be interested. So I was pretty surprised to see it come up now before the course registrations. And I have talked with a number of people about it, and I still have that concern. We've invested a lot in this program, and we have heard from a couple of students who have participated in this career-related, which is different than the diploma program. And I just, for the cost of putting it in the booklet and in the course guide and seeing whether there's interest, if there isn't, if it's undersized, then that would have to come to us anyway. So it's not like we're automatically saying run with it. We're saying have students had the opportunity to find out about it this year.
Chris, do you want to answer? Or
Go ahead,
CJ?
Chris.
Yeah.
So, you know, we have tried advertising, we have tried visiting classes to market IB. It's really unprecedented the way we've actually promoted the IB program, and that we don't do with other programs in our school. I think our students are just not able to take it with the number of courses that they're taking. I'm talking about the CP program. Keeping it on the books, I think what we realized, I remember that discussion that we had about this, but it's not only the cost of putting it in the book if we keep going. So the IB review, we have to identify what they're reviewing. Okay, so if we say we are planning to continue IB the diploma program and the IB career program, there's a lot of work that goes into having to put together documents, and as you can see, we've had only a handful of students participate in that program. So I think it's a lot of man hours that we get ready for the review and have to send them documentation, and then when they visit, they're expecting to visit that program as well and do a full review of that. There's also the fee that we pay for IB yearly. So And then we're going to need staffing if we continue to run it, no matter how many students is, even if there's 2.
Right, Chris, wouldn't there be like an opportunity cost? Because if we list that we're going to make it available,
right,
we need a teacher that can do that. And if we
Right.
do that, then that teacher's not available to potentially teach other sections that we could offer. I mean, we could cancel it, granted, if it didn't fill, but then we'd had an opportunity cost where we didn't offer something that might have filled.
And if the students sign up for it, it's usually weeks, if not months, before we make the final determination that we're not, if we don't run a section, and then those students have to find something else after the sections have been set.
And their schedule's then been built
And their schedules have been built around what they requested. So I just wanted to be, whether the board votes to keep it or not, I wanted you to be fully aware of all of those pieces, that it's not just about putting it in the course guide, it's also about getting ready for the IP review or IB review that we're about to undertake.
So just comment, about this. I mean, one of the things about being around here a little longer than some of our new board members, and I'm anticipating their experience building as time goes on, but thinking back to the first presentation of IB, of which I was a participant, one of the things I think about is the enthusiasm, and as you were saying, Chris, that in terms of the enthusiasm that you're hearing about, or have heard about the IB program, and that was certainly we were very much a participant in that. We heard a lot about that. So when we hear about this not going quite in the same direction as we had hoped, and I can appreciate it. It's one thing that comes through pretty loud and clear is that this isn't just about one class. This is about one class that is under-enrolled. This is about the whole, in a sense, that portion of the program that we need to take into account. And that's a different way of thinking about it, or a much broader view of it than I would have thought from the surface, at least. But I'll join Laurel in terms of this really has raised for me the role of a board member in something like this, because there are 9 of us, obviously, and we all have different perspectives and different points of view about this. And as I think about this, I think about a decision like this that comes up. Certainly, as my colleague reminded me last May, there was a discussion about this, and I didn't go back and check the record on it, but there was a recording of the meeting in which there was discussion about the need for kind of a deeper dive into working with the students and trying to promote this program and trying to get people involved and so on. And at the time, those ideas were put forward, and I know in good faith there was effort on the part of the administration and the part of the staff to try to reach out to the students and accomplish, try to create more enthusiasm and participation on the part of students. But that can only go so far, and so we're left with the circumstance here in terms of and thinking about my role in this. Is I'm helping to make a decision about this, and it's just that there are limits, I guess, basically, in terms of what we can accomplish. Even despite the enthusiasm on the front end about IB and about this side, the career side of IB, that it's not quite as productive and experience in terms of having students participate in this as we might have imagined at the time. And we're kind of recognizing that now, despite our efforts to try to inspire students to participate in this, there are limits to the involvement on the part of students to be a part of this program. So at this point, we're kind of left with the reality that you're describing in terms of our situation, in terms of whether we can continue this or not.
So the only course that we would no longer run as far as the CP program is the PPS course. And it's outlined in the memo what the components of that course are. It's a 2-year course. They still have access to all of the IB courses they would have taken, as well as all of the CTC courses they're planning to take. Mm-hmm. So the only difference is we're not paying IB to remain an IB certified accredited school for the CP program. And it's a pretty decent cost, so,
Yeah.
for the amount of students in it, so.
So the students who are currently enrolled in that will still have the opportunity to finish. Yeah, I had been originally kind of thinking about this on the terms that, Laurel had raised the concern of like, is the cost simply to run it in the schedule, and see what turns up, like to give students another chance for this coming year. But then I can see the concern that if we've seen a trend over multiple years of such low enrollment, that I wouldn't want students who might enroll in it to have their schedule built around something that isn't likely to run. So, yeah. Laurel?
Thanks. I just wanted to clarify one thing. When Dr. Duffy said the under-enrollment, am I right that the only one that's under-enrolled is the PPS of the CTC?
That's the only course that really is the part of this that
Okay.
is not running, yeah.
Okay.
But you have to have that course to get the CP
Yeah, no, I realize that. Has there been, you've mentioned that you've gone in and all, have we done any polling to see if kids have expressed, because again, nothing, what hasn't changed since May is we haven't seen the course registration. So I see the point about, do we even want to put it in the book if we're just going to discontinue it? But it seems to me it is valid to poll the kids in those classes and say who's, in the I guess, pipeline classes, the 10th graders, and say.
The problem is that it's a 2-year course.
Yeah.
And there's just not enough periods in the schedule for the kids to get the course. If they're taking a lot of courses in their content area, the CTC, it doesn't allow for them to, it's very difficult. So the interest is just not there because they're not willing to give up a CTC course in order to take this. And also there's a lot of interest in foreign language, which they need for 2 years to go to most colleges, or the band, the chorus. I mean, we have a high enrollment in those areas. So it's just really difficult for those kids to say, I want to take this 2-year course instead of these other things.
Deb?
I just wanted to also highlight something that was in the memo, which is under the career-related program, colleges and universities do not typically recognize the IB-CP certificate for college credit. I know that's not the only reason students do IB, the diploma program, but it is one added benefit of the diploma program. So if you're thinking about students and whether they're willing to give up time and other coursework to do this special program, one benefit of taking the AP classes or the IB diploma program is that you have the potential of getting college credit. So that's an enticement for the students to say, it's really worth putting a lot of effort into this program. If that's not even an option, then I can see why the students would be less interested. And what they really want are their CTC classes, right? Because they can do all of their CTC career-related classes. They just don't get that one IB course.
Yeah.
But they're not electing for that now.
Exactly.
Which is why we're
Right.
looking at the whole picture of what that looks like.
I'm completely in support.
Yeah, and having been here when we had the discussion of establishing the programs and what the different, each different arm of IB offered, I frankly envision a much more appeal from for the majority of our students for the diploma program, which we're keeping. That made a lot of sense. And being that we were going to go this entire route of training staff and doing all the things, I was supportive of doing the CP because we have the CT Center, we're making this effort. But I don't want to say that I was pessimistic that it would work, but I could very well envision seeing the one being successful and wondered how the other one would pan out, because for the very reasons that you've brought up as the explanation to why it's not desirable, because some of our CTC students may not be choosing to go to college and want to maximize their CT classes. Others, even if they are going to college, they have other fulfilling special interests that they want to meet. and it doesn't bring the college credit value. You know, there's a lot of really good philosophical value to it, but when kids are pressured up against a time wall and a 2-year commitment, and when you're in your teens, a 2-year commitment is just, that's a lot. You know, like, to say you're going to spend 2 years of your high school career, that's 50% of your high school career on one course. So, you know, I don't find it shocking that this has been a challenge. It's, you know, disappointing, but I think it made sense that we tried it because we were doing all the other things at the time. And I think now it also makes sense that we stop trying and focus on the one that's going successfully and doing well. So that's my personal perspective.
Okay. Any other questions or discussion? Laurel?
I want to make sure that I'm understanding it, because, and I had sent this question in, because from some of the conversation about this, I've had the sense that kids would have to take two of the career classes, the CTC classes, and that's why they wouldn't want to give them up. But in our course guide, it only shows one per year. So has there been a change? Like, for instance, a kid in architecture in 11th grade would take architecture 2 or 3, and in 12th grade would take architecture 3 and 4. It doesn't list that they have to take an additional one that year.
Right, but
So am I
architecture is a
missing
little bit
something?
different than some of the other.
Well, or advanced accounting in 11th grade and stocks and investment in 12th grade. There's, in each of the tracks, there's only one per year.
Didn't some of those courses have a 2-period?
Maybe that's it. I mean, I just don't know. That's what I'm checking on.
Well, and other CTC students, sorry, I don't mean to
Sorry,
jump in,
wait,
but other
see if Ben
CTC
Warden
students are
can-
also striving to achieve NOCTI and other things, so that has other requirements. So we can't just assume the business track and the architecture track are going to be able to fill the DP program. Like that's a small number.
program?
Or, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah. I keep flip-flopping them in my mouth. Yeah, because other CTC programs, they have a wealth of things that they have to fulfill for NOCTI, and NOCTI has sometimes, right, more value for them.
Yeah, it's
Or
their-
other certifications
right,
that
their
they
other
can get.
certification. So to answer your question, I think, Laurel, the CP program students have to take 2 DP classes. So if you're in the career program, you have to take a high level, which is a 2-year class, and a standard level, which could be a 1 or a 2-year class, depending on which one you pick. So that's that additional requirement on top of their core class. It may be on top of their core classes, and with the additional PPS 2-year component as well. So it's a good amount of time in their schedule that they have to commit to for all of this. And as you said, if they are in music or some other elective that they really want to take, it would be, I think, a real challenge to schedule that.
Ben, you want to answer the question about CTC and the 2 courses?
Yeah, excuse me. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Oh, we can hear you.
Yes.
Okay, sorry. Yeah, so they're just going to be in their normal CTC track, like they were in the program, regardless if they're in IB or not. That would have no bearing on the CTC classes they take. What they have to agree to in addition is to take 2 diploma program classes. Then they also have to complete 4 components, which one is taking the professional skills course. They also have to do a service learning project of 50 hours. They also have to do a language development project for 50 hours. And then they have to do a reflective project for 50 hours. Does that answer the question?
And how many CTC courses for a completer do they need in the 11th and 12th grade year?
Yeah, they're different for everyone, but most of them are taking 1 or 2 credits per grade of CTC.
Right, I was remembering that when we had approved some changes to the CTC schedule, I think it was a year or 2 years ago, that there was an increase, I think, related to some state regulations about in a number of the CTC programs where students would be in 2 periods per cycle rather than just 1 period per cycle for some of the programs.
Correct. And we have to offer that. They do not need to.
Okay.
So there, in many cases, they can take half a credit or 1 credit, but we're actually offering them up to 4 credits their senior year and up to 2 credits. But also, important to note, very few of these are approved programs. So we're talking about accounting and finance, which is not approved. So we have no requirements from the state. Architecture, engineering, and marketing, none of them are approved. The ones that are approved are health professions and sports therapy.
That would align with the CP program.
Correct.
Okay. That's helpful. Any other? Okay. Any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecoeur?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Sidney?
No.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
And Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed. Moving to item D, it's a motion to approve the agreement with Moritz Consulting for SEL implementation training, and this is shown in attachment 6D.
Huff so moved.
Bader, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions and discussion? Laurel?
Yes, as I shared with you, this was shared with CCL. It is for a 2-year program, up to 21 teachers, 36 hours of training a year, based on a Cassell was the name of the model. So I went and looked at that, and when I looked at the website for that, it was very clear that that there are some steps before this that the district has yet to do in terms of communicating with stakeholders, setting a vision for social emotional learning and all. So this just seemed to me like something that was sort of putting the cart before the horse at a time when we hear that our staff are overwhelmed a lot. And I think the idea is a good one, and whether we are ready to do it, it did not look like it from many of the things that I looked at on the site regarding this. So,
In terms of steps that
the model that this is supposed to be training for.
And, having done a little bit of research into it when we kids came forward with CCL, as Laurel just indicated, this can be as big or as small as you want it to be. This is either this can be either a comprehensive training program that involves multiple layers of involvement on the part of the organization, or at the other extreme, it can be something which provides technical support to people in the classroom who are trying to implement this social emotional learning initiative on a kind of a day-by-day basis, and giving them some assistance in finding practical examples, if you will, of these behaviors that they can model for the students. And I think the way in which I've come to understand this is kind of an instructional coaching model by which we're going to try to provide opportunities for those classroom teachers to be able to know enough about the concepts involved that they can, one, apply it to their own behaviors, and then explain that or provide examples to students about the use of those skills in their own everyday experience, by which the teachers can then understand these concepts better and communicate them better to students. I mean, that was my distinct impression from this, and it's a pretty, I mean, as Laurel's suggesting, this is a pretty well researched and well reviewed program. This involves, and it's not just one person in CASEL. The CASEL is an acronym for basically a group of professionals, and I forget which higher ed institution they're affiliated with. And unfortunately, the person who was the driver behind all this just passed away within the last year or two, unfortunately. But the bottom line is, this can be as big or as small as you want it to be. And in talking with the consultant about this, they seem to understand Amy Moritz spoke about this and was online with us. And they certainly talked about system change and talked about the impact of this work and how it would operate. That was satisfied me in terms of their understanding of what would be involved to make this work. But it can be as big or as small as you want it to be. So I think, and my impression is that this is an opportunity that we have based on funding that's available for us, as long as we don't, but as long as we recognize what the boundaries of this are, and and to go along with Laurel's point of view about this, we really have to be careful when we introduce this to involve classroom teachers and other staff and these kinds of things. We have to recognize that they all have whole raft of other duties and responsibilities that are coming down at the same time. And so as long as we're respectful of their needs and we involve them in these decision processes about implementing these kinds of tools, then I think it can be effective. But we have to recognize that when it comes to it seems to me, and I'm getting carried away with this stuff, but in terms of talking about it, but I think that it has value as long as you recognize the boundaries within which we'll be using this and the ways in which we put it into practice. It can be, as from having read briefly about it, Laurel's correct, it can be as big or as small as we want it to be, but this is going to be, it seems to me to be best implemented, would be put within a box, if you will, of a supplemental program to what we're doing already. That's my impression.
So I guess I just want to clear up a little bit of what, just for the public that might be watching, what this framework is, the CASEL framework, and it's from a collaborative organization. I'm going to tell you what it is in 1 second. I had to open up a different window because I have my Zoom window open. But they're looking at self-management, self-responsibility, making responsible decisions, helping students work through the kind of skills that can make them successful in the classroom. It's basically building successful skills as a student. So it does seem like this is on point for what we know our students need, especially coming out of the pandemic, where many students were missing some of those skills to be a successful student. So
I'd also like to point out that, as was presented by the administration, we're sending 21 staff members to participate in this program. So the expectations there are no, and these are volunteer, these are selected and willing participants that want to engage in this professional development.
Correct.
And so we're not placing burdens on people that aren't willing to take on that work. And this is part of our strategic plan. We have made certain goals that this approach will assist us in being successful at. So if we're going to go through our process for our strategic plan, then these are some of the tools that we need to use to get there. And so I think that the people who have the professional training and are advising us on how we get there have recommended that this be the training that we use, as I had chatted with other board members about, that, that this was vetted by our professional staff.
Peter?
Yeah, and I would just add to that it seems as though it's kind of in line with what we're encouraging our own staff and teachers to do through a program like Together All, which is later on the program, which has things about working together to share, to develop these things about self-responsibility, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, I just feel like there's a way that the district has been working to create as coherent an environment as possible to support individuals and groups of people so that they can deal with their own issues, understanding that their employer should probably help them and help them create an environment in which they can mutually support each other with training. That's all I have to.
Could I add to something?
Sure,
that
Carlene.
I guess Peter and Amy kind of said. The few meetings that I've been to about the superintendent search, about one of the things they say, the best thing about the community, about SCASD, the number one thing are the teachers. The parents love the teachers, the students love the teachers, and I think the administration is doing a good job. I really do. With everything else with the pandemic that teachers had to go through. So I do believe that this is in the best interest for the school and the teachers. And I kind of agree with a lot of the points that was brought up.
Thanks. Jackie?
And just to pile on, the acting superintendent was telling us how our quality of teacher ranked 13th out of 500th in the state in that survey. And I think it's really important that we keep pushing to get even better and not rest on our laurels. And in general, just PD is a great way to give people space to reflect and think about how they can do things better. And that's what it sounds like this is providing. And so I think that's what a good employer does. You give your employees a chance to grow within their discipline. So definitely in support of this. Thank you.
Great. If there's no other comments, then we'll go to public comment. And if there's no public comment, we'll take a roll call vote.
Dr. Beck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevacor?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Sydney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Thank you. Item E is a motion to approve an agreement with the State College Ramada Inn for the DECA competition, and this is described in attachment 6E.
Huff, so moved.
Second.
Okay,
Crevacor.
Thanks. It's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion on this item? Just a note that this is, the district is renting this for the DECA competition, but there's entry fees for contestants throughout the state that are coming to it, so that.
That was going to be my question, and I'm pretty sure this will be covered with all the excitement and all the entry fees and everything else. Okay.
Any other questions or discussion? Any public comment? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevacor?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Sydney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Grant?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed. Item F is a motion to approve the agreement with Togetherall for mental health support initiatives for employees, and this is shown in attachment 6F.
Buck, so moved.
Huff, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion?
Yes, I have a question.
Arlene? Yeah.
This is supposed to be anonymous, but we're gonna keep track of the teachers that respond or go to it. Is it gonna be how many times they go, or
how many people use
Yes,
it?
exactly. How are you gonna keep track of that exactly?
First, let me assure everybody, we will not be given names. We have no idea. I forget whether we get anything at all about position. I don't think so. Yeah, we just have number of individuals attending.
Okay, so it doesn't mean if they attend so many times, they're not counted as, they're only counted at one time.
So state college area school district employees.
Jean.
Okay.
Sorry. State college area school districts will have a code that they know as a state college employee. So that'll tell us the number of people. So whether it's that same code that they count once or how many times they hit, is that what you're asking?
Yes.
I don't know that answer.
I think yes.
Okay.
They told us when we went through the website.
You were listening.
It just took me a minute to remember that if I go on the website, then I sign up. So they either assign me a number or an identifier, or I assign myself one, but I'm given an identifier. And they do that because these discussions are monitored in case there is the danger of escalating concern. They can get help to that person. So it's not like somebody's listening in. They have some kind of electronic, kind of like the NSA, looking for words to identify somebody who has escalating concerns. So they do know who that person is. So they would know that SCASD person number 1 has entered conversations twice.
Okay.
SCASD person number 2 has entered conversations 100 times. So that's the kind of information they would give us, but not who or anything else.
Okay. Is there like, you want to see how it's being used and how it's being utilized? Are you looking at a special benchmark? Like if 10 people uses this versus 20 people, like what's your cutoff?
We don't have that established. Quite frankly, if one person uses it and benefits from it, I'm not sure that's a bad thing. Obviously, we have close to, well, if you look at all of our employees, about 1,800 employees. So you would want to see some kind of decent usage, but that's a discussion we'll have to have. Is one person benefiting enough? Or do we want to see a certain percentage of our population?
Great. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm trying to fit this initiative into the broader scheme of things. One of the things I think it's important for those in the community to know is that through our healthcare system, individual employees can seek counseling for themselves.
Yes.
And there is coverage for that, maybe not 100%, but there's substantial coverage for whatever their counseling needs might be.
For any employee who is in a position that is eligible for benefits, correct?
Right, for benefits. So, and there was a time before, well, many years ago, before we had this benefit, that it was thought to be helpful. And one of the initiatives that was brought forward, I'm not sure I was working for the district then, but this is a different school organization, where we had employee assistance programs, where you were provided an opportunity to chat with someone as an employee. You could have an opportunity to chat with someone and to have an outlet, if you will, and then from that be directed to a counselor or some other services that might be helpful to you given your presenting problem at the time. That's not what we're talking about now. This is different.
We still have that in place.
That's still there. Okay.
This would be for the employee.
Right.
Actually, a question just entered my mind. The employee's family?
No.
No, just the employee.
Okay.
And it's, I don't want to say that mental health is like Alcoholics Anonymous, but it's a self-help group. It's not talking to a therapist.
Okay.
One of the things we found during the pandemic, we would do some listening circles, and a lot of people that participated in those listening circles just wanted someone to talk to and understand where they were coming from. When we lost a student last year by suicide, we made a connection with Ben Locke. Ben had spoken to me and several others about this process and utilizing it for students. When myself and other staff were hearing this, we felt, oh, wait, this is something that we feel staff would really like, knowing what we experienced through those listening circles. And so through that process, I brought Linda and Corey in because I thought that made sense. So we're looking at all staff and utilizing this and having that common language.
That's the context I was wondering about. That was you're just answering my next question. Where the heck did this come from?
Sorry.
Because it's just, I mean, you have to appreciate it. On our end, we get one after the other of these kinds of contract requests for different forms of services without having a larger view of how this all fits together.
Right.
Being married to someone who was directly impacted by the stressor you're just talking about, this makes perfect sense. And so to the extent that it really would strengthen the system, the capacity of the system to help those who would otherwise not have the resources that they need to be able to deal with everyday stressors. I think, and given our concern about staff in terms of their everyday lives and the impact, the stresses that they're under, this is really helpful. This is a really valuable resource from what you're describing.
Yeah, it felt like a wellness plan that we could really sink our teeth into.
Yes.
And the staff that utilized or that head up our wellness plan really liked it.
Got it. Thank you.
And the cost spread over 1,800 employees.
Oh, it's tiny.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's not the everyday person out there who pays just paid their property taxes. This is not a small amount of money, but in relation to the scale of the numbers of staff we have on board and the quality of this, what might be the quality of this particular service, I think it's a very reasonable cost.
Okay. Peter?
Yeah, I mean, I was going to say, you know, I did a little bit of reading about the company, including the New Zealand Department of Health had very good things to say about it, including that it can be incorporated into work with a therapist, so that's good, and that it is well facilitated. So the groups are facilitated. You're not just going in, you know, to some wild west of, you know, I'm sad, and then you know it's there's a little bit more than that. And I just want to pick up on something that Linda had said, you know, about Alcoholics Anonymous. You know, recovery groups for whether it's for addiction, deep grief, having come out of disease, you know, having a terminal illness, whatever that is, those things do a lot of good. And we've seen through the pandemic that well facilitated and managed groups in online settings can work very, very well. And sometimes having distance from, you know, like if you don't know that it's, you know, the guy who works down the hall or whatever, that protective factor can be helpful. But I think I maybe share I don't know if it's a concern, but just you know, the question that Dr. Crevecoeur asked about, well, how will we know if people use it, and how many, and if we spend $10,000 on one person, is that good? And, you know, maybe it depends on the intervention or, you know, whatever has happened. And so, you know, I guess in a year, I would like to know, or for you all to just keep track of how it's being used without getting into people's business. So I very much appreciate this.
Yeah, we will not be able to break the firewall. Only together all can break the firewall under very, very strict circumstances. So
I think that's really important.
yeah.
Yeah.
We will not know. Everyone has an alias name they give themselves. Like, we won't know anything related to that. But they do have a special ID for SCASD, so we will be able to get those counts.
So you'll know. SCASD unique visitors.
Correct.
That makes sense. Okay. Any other questions? Laurel?
Yeah, that background was really very helpful, because I think exactly what Dr. Buck said, that opportunity to talk, I hadn't been aware, and I don't know how the facilitation works, but it does provide the safety that if someone got inappropriate, et cetera, two types of safety. If someone gets inappropriate, there is that, and they can be removed, so you can feel safe maybe sharing concerns or whatever, similar to an online support group like that. Also, there is a place in there, and I think this may have been where some of the confusion, because it took me a while to work my way through it, that they do have something if they realize someone is getting into true crisis, that they have different ways that they can. It doesn't say that they actually have ever totally, you know, reveal, because they don't know, but they can try to zero in on where the person's located, because these are people at least all over the country, I think. I don't know if international.
All over the globe.
Yeah, so that, I think, it might be very helpful for some of our people in a safe environment, unlike some things like, say, a Facebook group. All kinds of things can happen there. Really, I mean, and that's what people, when they're under stress, and you want to find someone in a similar situation. So with that explanation, it sounds certainly I really appreciate the background on it.
Right. Any other questions? Any public comment on this item? Yes. Yeah. And if you could just introduce yourself.
Shay McGowan. I am the president of the Teacher Association. And I just want to, I think, you know, Peter, you said, is $10,000 for one person worth it? Yes, it is. This district, this community can't experience another suicide. and whether it be a student or a teacher. And so it is worth it. And people need this because they need to know that they're protected when they reach out for help, and it's not going to bite them in the butt later on when somebody says, well, you know, your mental health made you do, if nobody knows about it, it's their own private. Like you said, Peter, earlier, that, you know, you have a colleague, you shouldn't, maybe you don't know that colleague is going through stuff, but they're getting the help. And so I would really encourage everybody to put this in place to help. Our teachers are struggling. They need help. It's not easy right now. And so this will help them. Hopefully, those people will use it and reach out for it. And it's not just for teachers, right? It's for anybody in the district,
Any
which
employee.
is even more crucial.
Any employee, not for students.
Right. Yeah, any employee. That's what I meant. So it's very crucial. So I encourage you to vote for it.
Thank you. Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Crevacor?
Yes.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes, gladly.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
And Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Item G is a motion to approve the foundation fundraising proposal that is attached in 6G.
Anderson, so moved.
Crevacor, second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Questions or discussion? Any public comment?
Just one quick question. I'm sorry. The word, in the description, it talks about benches, but there are blank lines in the actual agreement that's included in that. Will that then be filled in?
Randy?
It just wasn't, you see what I'm asking? Because we talked about it being a pilot program with benches, and that's in the description, but in the attached contract, it's left blank.
Right, that would get filled in.
Okay,
yes.
that was all I wanted to check, that we're still talking about the pilot program.
Pilot
not-
program is benches, yes.
Okay.
Understand that what we talked about with the foundation board is that their additional items would be, as the program is expanded, would be worked out with the district.
Yeah.
And it wouldn't be a new revision to the agreement with the board. But yes, there would obviously, that would get filled in, and it was left intentionally blank because it could be expanded to other things in the future.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I had been surprised because I knew we talked about it, and that's why I wanted to check. Thanks.
Okay.
Sure.
Sounds good. All right. Other questions? Okay, any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevacor?
Yes.
Okay, that item has passed. Item H, well, let me back up. So the way that we put item H and item I on here, because the board had not, there wasn't necessarily a sense of where we were going in terms of whether we would be authorizing or waiving the lead certification requirement for these projects. So we left the motions on the agenda open-ended so that anyone can make a motion either way. So item H then would be a motion to either authorize or waive lead certification for the physical plant building project as shown in attachment 6H. So if anyone would like to make a motion.
Buck, I move to authorize the lead certification for the physical plant building.
Second.
Okay, that has been moved and seconded. So that's the discussion on the table for consideration. Questions or discussion? Any public comment on this? Sorry.
Hold on.
Sorry, I can't see you.
I know, it's sorry. So we had a involved discussion at committee about these items, and there's lots of conundrum about it, and so I'll just share a few quick comments about my approach to decision-making on this, because it's really kind of a tricky one for me. So I want to state clearly that I fully support the lead process, and I think it has a lot of value in a lot of ways. I also, though, think that these smaller projects are open to a little more interpretation and leniency, and so that's tricky. I think that we are in a different place than we were in 2008 when the resolution was passed, in terms of a lot more construction in general being of a more sustainable bent. So my decisions tonight will be to support LEED certification in some projects and perhaps not in others, because my biggest concern is timelines. So the impact of supply chain and other things, I think that for myself, I place a really high priority on having the North CTC building renovation be completed in an expeditious manner. And so that impacts my decision-making on whether LEED certification is necessary. So I know I'm talking about both items, but I just wanted to share some of my thoughts on decision-making. So I don't know. Hopefully that's clear.
Deb?
I guess in the same vein, I'll just share some general thoughts that probably pertains to both. I guess I would like to just point out, because I don't know that we emphasized this at the last meeting, that the recommendation that came to us from administration was to waive LEED certification. And to be clear, the recommendation was to follow LEED Silver guidelines and to have the sustainable building, but to forego the official certification in order to save both time and money. And I would say for myself personally, the timeline matters, like Dr. Bader said, and the finances matter. As the chair of finance and as one of 9, I just feel like every time we make a decision to spend a significant amount of taxpayers' money, we need to remember that there are opportunity costs when we spend money. So if we spend, for example, in this particular motion, the additional cost estimate is $50,000 to $100,000 to do LEED certification for the physical plant building. So if we spend up to $100,000 to get certification, which is not going to make the building more sustainable in my understanding. My understanding is the building will be LEED Silver qualifications, whether we get the actual stamp of approval or not. That's money that we can't spend on something else, and that weighs heavily on me. And so I think given the state of our budget and where we are with other things, I personally feel comfortable saying that if we follow the spirit of the resolution so that we have the sustainable building, but we don't have the official stamp, I'm comfortable with that. And that explains how I'm going to vote this evening. Thanks.
Laurel?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the opportunity to learn more about this. Can you, in the original, when we first learned about this in July, you said that part of the need for this had come around because there had been some new, since we completed the high school memorial field, which at that time we expected to put the physical plant into the north building, you said the district's needs have evolved, requiring additional space. Can you explain a little about what the new needs are?
Sure. As you said, and as you can see on the screen.
Randy, is your mic on?
I'm sorry?
Is your mic on?
Yes, it is. I guess I'm
Okay,
not close
sorry.
enough. No, you're fine. Where my cursor is, this is the actual old high school from the Google Maps. They have not updated in several years. But where my cursor is right here is the old former CTC location, and that's the section of the building that we're talking about in the other motion, but it's related to this discussion. That is where we had expected to put the physical plant department back when the high school project was being completed. Our needs have changed. We have, we still have some people in the Fairmont building that we need to get housed in other locations. And so some of those people are related to the special education department. They were once housed in this building. We want to get them back into this building as well. At the time, we did not have an equity director. That position has been in a school building, but we would also like to have that person be back in this building permanently when we get that office. We'd like those people to be connected with other people that are in this building. And so we also now have a robust virtual academy, which we at one time thought that might be located in the high school. Now with all of the expansion of different services, thank you, that we need to provide in the high school, there's no longer room for the virtual academy, as well as we understand that a lot of the students that are in the virtual academy don't feel comfortable going into the high school building and they want a smaller environment. So, however, there are some that go back and forth and take some classes virtually and need some assistance on occasion, so they need that space, and then they also take classes in the high school. So being on that high school campus will help them, as well as the Wright program has been in Fairmont since they were in a off-site location several years ago. And so that needs a location. And again, there's a connection there that those students can't be in a high school building. They couldn't be in the Delta building, but they could be connected in that North CTC because it's not connected to the Delta building. There's no physical interior connection. Okay? I think some board members would understand what I mean from the tour that we offered a couple months ago, or a month or so ago. But sometimes students do transition from Wright back into the schools, and so them being able to be on that campus is a benefit as well. And so we have successfully this year moved Hearts out of Fairmont into an elementary school, and that has taken some capacity out of our elementary world. And we're hoping to get St. Clair Child Services back into an elementary school as well. Again, I bring that up because those could have been some solutions for some of our teachers, such as the special education curriculum teachers and whatnot. We've had an expansion of our autism program, autistic classrooms in the elementary level. So again, that's taking some of our capacity. And so as we've looked at some of these, I'm going to call one-offs, which are folks that could operate independently, or if they're in this administrative building, it could be a much more beneficial practice. We just are constrained for space. And so some of those folks that I talked about, student services, equity, gifted, special education, we'd like them to be in the IT area here in this building and then move IT to the north former CTC spaces. That allows IT to be on the campus with where most of our where we have the largest number of employees, the largest number of students, the largest number of devices. Also our data center, which would give some synergy to being on the campus with our data center and help with maintenance as well as emergency repairs. And so that takes the north primary, those three things, IT, Wright, and virtual, take the vast majority, if not all, of that space of the north CTC. That means that physical plant does not have a location, and that is thus the reason for a physical plant building. I just want to take a look at my notes if I could. Again, some board members went on a tour of that space, and you saw that we are using that as district-wide storage. We have no other location in the district to be district-wide storage. So that's another rationale why we need this physical plant building, because it will be a shop space where we can have a carpentry shop and a mechanic shop to work on vehicles, and then also for some an athletic storage space, as well as an overall general district storage space, receiving deliveries and then dispersing them out throughout the district. So I think that pretty much, if I could just point out a little bit about the location of that physical plant building. On the screen you'll see a red, I couldn't think of the color, sorry, square or diamond, and that is highlighting the location of this proposed building. This is a lot next to Community Field is a gravel lot, which would end up needing some resurfacing. If not pavement, it would need some new coarse stone laid in. This is coming up Irwin Avenue from South Atherton Street. The pepper mill is located right here. There is a property also adjacent, and then that the district does not own. There is a commercial building here, other commercial buildings along South Atherton Street. We're talking about this building here on the Community Field side of the building. The building would be 1 story, and I have some depictions if that's necessary. That would be where the office and general and some of the storage would be accessed. The lower side of the building that allows for 2 stories, and the topography, there is a grade. So although it's 1 story on the Community Field side, on what I'm going to call the north building side of the building, it would be 2 stories. And so it's not going to be really largely sticking out of the ground and should not be a big detraction and block anyone's view. As you can see, there's not really any close neighbors. We have trees on an undeveloped part of the property, which would be very difficult to develop. All the way over here on the other side of Prospect is where your closest neighbors are, on the other side of the tennis courts and Community Field. And then on this side of the building is obviously now in this space here would be the north field, or maybe even over, and then we have parking lot, and then you cross westerly to the high school. So there's not really another purpose for this plot of land. And again, we have a large campus here, and so having physical plant housed there should increase our response time to any issues that would come up. But that is not a plot of land that we could easily convert into another athletic field or anything like that. So I think that the only other plots of land that potentially could house a facility of this nature would be on either end of the district. Here on this campus, we own some land adjacent to the Panorama building here, but that is not developed yet. It still has trees on it, and when we purchased that, the idea was that might allow for an additional field space on this campus. Park Forest has some undeveloped property as well. Again, not able to be developed immediately, as well as, with that campus and that building needing some attention in the future, I wouldn't recommend making any decisions that would affect that campus until we do a true master plan analysis and move forward there. So the only other thing that I will say is one of the things that is missing from, you have some upcoming action items that you're going to be receiving about asbestos abatement, approving those bids, permission to go out and bid both of these projects, and then actually accepting the bids. And before you are asked to do that, the finance team will provide you with a capital financing update so that you understand what monies are available for this project and how we can pay for it.
Yeah, I think, I guess some of the things that I'd like to discuss maybe in the facilities and grounds and/or if we do a joint meeting with finance, certainly projected costs for this project and what we're interested in spending on it or would need to spend on it, as well as kind of understanding how the whole site might work together because this is kind of redeveloping now that back half of the high school campus behind the north building abutting Community Field. And I think that if we're going to be doing this project, we need to think kind of holistically about how that site is going to work together.
Well, I will tell you that, again, athletics doesn't have a lot of storage for their equipment. And so there is not necessarily a lot of equipment related to baseball, softball, but there is some. And there are times when other sports and things use those field spaces as well. So having that access there, or even the field that is, going to be immediately in front of this proposed building, that will be a great asset to them to have that access. And it's not too far from Memorial Field and that type of thing. So I think that, from that perspective, it makes a lot of sense there as well.
And I guess also, understanding what the walking pathways are going to look like, so that we're connecting, the neighborhood, pathways to Atherton Street, pathways to Community Field, so that it kind of works well for pedestrians through the site.
Yep, we can look at that. I don't think that we've gotten to that stage yet in the development, but yes, we can make sure that that's a discussion item.
Because I wasn't sure how much of this involved site development as well, other than, I
Yes.
just wasn't sure if we'd gotten to that point. so.
We definitely have not gotten to it yet, so we'll make sure that we pursue that.
And then the aesthetics of what that unrenovated portion of the high school is going to look like, since right now it's fairly dilapidated.
So to speak.
Yeah, right.
Well, and I mean, can I just try to clarify at least that Randy's defined the need for these facilities. And one way or the other, we're going to need to address the needs of these programs in terms of providing an adequate space. Coupled with the fact that we have older facilities that, as Amber just suggested, might be out of date, and that we could well afford to renovate and demolish, perhaps, or replace with facilities that better meet our needs. And so I don't think this vote is about that. This vote is about whether we're going to seek whether or not we're going to seek LEED certification for these facilities to help with budget planning, to help the administration make decisions about the time required to move ahead with these projects, and to assist them and also the board in making decisions about that. But this particular motion is about whether or not we as a board feel that we should be empowering the administration to seek LEED certification for these facilities or not. Am I correct?
That's right. Yeah, that's true. But I just thought, since this is a
sure.
juncture at which we are discussing these projects,
Oh, it's all
generally,
good.
that
It's all
it's
good.
worth noting some of the pieces that have still not been.
The context.
Right.
I'm really concerned about the Kids in the Right program. And there's a long history within special ed and education for providing adequate, appropriate, equitable facilities for students to receive, in which to receive their programs. And frankly, we have really underserved those students for years. And it's time we did something. And as I said earlier in an earlier discussion, even if we have to purchase or rent a space for those students in a more normalized environment, which isn't a 105-year-old program in which a building in which they are the only recipients of the services that they are receiving, I think the present situation is woefully inadequate. And so, to the extent, and so however it's accomplished,
But proximity to the high school.
that will help. I'm not denying that. I'm just saying that if we have to hold things back, to achieve LEED certification, we have to hold back anticipate a timeline that will maybe extend an additional 6 months to their being excluded from an appropriate space. We have to, but we can still provide for them through a rented space that will allow us, to, in good faith, address some goals we might have in terms of sustainability, and kind of balancing that out with the needs of these students and the responsibility that we have to provide an adequate space for those students and their teachers. What I'm getting at basically is that my basic point was that even though we know these needs are there, we knew that we require these facilities, how are we going to address that, and are we going to be up or down on the decision to approve LEED certification or to say LEED certification is part of the formula for those programs. And
So are you saying that if the timeline is going to stretch out, that we need to make some accommodations?
combination for the people involved,
right.
for the people who are really impacted by this. So yeah, right. If we have to achieve LEED certification, it means we may have to rent some space and an alternate to the location where they're presently being educated. That's much more in step with their needs and their rights, basically, under special ed law. So anyway, and I guess what I'm getting at is that when it comes to thinking about LEED certification, it's all how you can frame it in terms of the additional time and costs for the program, but also another way of thinking of it is in terms of credentialing. If we live in a community where many people are involved with the university, which is essentially an institution that is involved with the credentialing of experiences for individuals to achieve whatever accomplishment they're trying to achieve, whether it's in a degree program or whether it's in graduate school or whatever. That we're in a community which is really focused on the role of an institution in deciding whether an individual or has achieved what's necessary to be able to say that they can earn a Bachelor of Arts degree, a Bachelor of Science, a doctoral degree, or whatever it happens to be. In the same way, this LEED certification program is a credentialing program. It's essentially something by which we can say we have achieved, and it's recognized as a standard that we've met in terms of, and something that we can, not just for ourselves, but for the whole community and for our students, we can really kind of represent that we in fact did accomplish what we wanted to accomplish in terms of meeting some goals for sustainability. And I think that's the way I've come to think of this whole decision. And I agree with Deb. There's some costs to that, and there's some costs in terms of additional time required to accomplish this. But I don't think there's an equivalent way. I don't think it's easy to say, well, we can just simply do the same things, but then we won't get certification for that. Well, that's really not the same. It really doesn't have that power, if you will, of that certificate, if you will, that we'd be earning through our work. So I'm inclined to go with the certification to support the motion that's been presented. I'd support the motion that we should be we should vote in favor of LEED certification and the credentialing process for what it would mean to our students, to our community, and in terms of our it being coherent and consistent with earlier decisions we made. Peter, I see your hand is up, so I'll toss the floor over to you then.
Could I just one moment?
Yeah.
Sorry. I think just to piggyback on what Dan was saying, that's where I was coming from as well, in terms of that there is the credentialing is important because it's proof that we're doing what we said we would do, but it's also, given the size, the cost of these projects is significant, that it's a third-party verification that we're getting what we're paying for. So, Peter.
Yeah, I guess. Thank you. The policy was written in 2008, and
Resolution.
Yeah, it's a resolution.
a resolution is a policy. Yes, it is. It is a policy. A policy is an instrument adopted by some elected body in order to guide future behavior, and the resolution does exactly that. It is not a stricture, right, that is written into our code of policies, but a resolution, a proclamation, any of those things is a policy. And this policy does say to us in the second resolved that new building and major renovation project ensure that every new school, new building, and major renovation project from the beginning of the design process incorporate LEED for schools design standards and best practices, not or best practices, and maybe sometimes best practices, and that said construction projects minimally meet LEED certification criteria at the silver level, that the district seek LEED certification. So I would say that the resolution, which was adopted by a previous board, tells this board what it's supposed to do. And since 2008, 420 gigatons of CO2 have gone into the atmosphere. And the temperature has gone up 0.6 degrees Fahrenheit. The atmosphere doesn't, it's going to do what it's going to do. And we're more likely to have an efficient, I know I'm being very combative right now, but we are much more likely to have a high performance building that lives up to the standard and the spirit of policy 833 that says that we are going to do things like try to do maximum energy efficiency. And I think that now we're dealing in this vote with the not the North Building project, but
This is the physical plant building.
it's the
yeah.
physical plant, but the two have gotten lumped together in the conversation. And I think that saying that, well, all of the other kids get a LEED certified building or LEED certified project, but you don't because we want to make sure that it gets done fast, is a way to get a building to not be done as well. And so the kids who we say we want to do the best for, because maybe they've been left out the most, now get a building that we're going to rush to get done because we say that we care about them the most, instead of taking care through a certification process that does the best for them with that building. And I mean,
Okay, so
I don't know why we would do that. I really struggle with that, understanding that they've been in a situation that they've accepted, that we've accepted for however many years, and that no, now we have to rush and we're not going to do this thing that ultimately has proof behind it of having a more high performance building that's healthier and better for them.
I'd like to respond a little bit because I think that was some pretty, I'm sorry.
No,
Karen,
go ahead. You could go. Okay, I'll go
That
after you.
that was addressing my comments, I think largely, and that really painted them in a broad brushstroke that wasn't accurate. So first of all, I want to clarify that we have done, for the public's understanding, we have done other renovations that have not met LEED standards. We did renovations in the athletic center. We've done smaller piecemeal renovations that we have done, which based on the resolution have not been required to meet LEED certification because they were smaller. And we very easily could do multiple small renovations in a building and never meet LEED certification because they perhaps are under that threshold. And over a period of 2 or 3 renovations, we could do an entire building that way. So I think we have to be careful about saying we have to adhere to this or that because of dollar figures or other things. I understand the spirit of the resolution was to create a threshold to when those things were done. I think that I'm not saying that we need to speed it along and have a less high quality building. That's not what I've said I've supported. I said I've supported that the district is willing to meet the standards and forego the certification process for the benefit that would entail with both finances and the timeline. So I don't, to say that I'm okay to do a speedy building and potentially have it be a less high quality building, that is not what has been proposed by the district. And that is not what I'm saying I support. I'm saying I support what the district has proposed is to meet the standards and not have the qualifications. And I do understand and acknowledge that there is an opening for not achieving that goal or having a risk for uncertainty. Everything we do has a risk for uncertainty. And I think every dollar we spend has opportunity costs that go along with it. And I do have real, sincere, legitimate concerns about supply chain and hangups and problems. And I think that those students deserve to be in a building at the beginning of the school year, if at all possible. And I think that there is an opportunity there to do that. I am happy to support the LEED certification for the physical plant building because I think we have the ability and timeline to do it. So I understand that my decision-making doesn't meet your standards, but please don't paint what I said as that I'm accepting a substandard building for time, because that's what you alluded to. And so I just want to make that clear to others. That's what I heard from what you said.
But I did not say that. That's not what I said. I did not say that you are accepting a substandard building.
Okay, quick.
Well,
Okay. Peter, one question that I do have for you, though, if the administration follows all the LEED principle and complete the LEED standing checklist and a minimum of silver level, would that be going against the resolution, though?
Yes.
Because it's not officially certified?
Correct. That's totally how I read the resolution. I read the resolution as requiring the actual certification process, and as much as
because we would be accomplishing if it's. I see what you mean, but my thing is everything that you said about the environment and everything else. We all believe that, but if the building is doing exactly that because it went through all the checklists, isn't it? But it doesn't have that seal of approval.
From having, been on the board directly after that was passed and having had a chance to touch base with at least one board member who was instrumental in writing this, yes, the intent was to ensure that there would be that certification process because of some of the steps that are involved in that integrated design process, being creating a record and transparency for the way that the building is being designed, or a building or a project is being designed, that the process itself being valuable and the credentialing being a way of creating and embedding a culture of where this is what we do.
Okay.
And
at least that was my interpretation of
and
my understanding of. Yeah.
And that's my understanding too, and I think that that's Gretchen's understanding as well from talking to the same individual, if I can say that. And I would say that this has nothing to do with intent or malfeasance or something like that. The district has no one on its staff who is accredited themselves to do the certification process. So even if they say, well, we'll go through the checklist, I can write the checklist. I mean, I can fill it in with all sorts of things. The ability and the knowledge behind the systems that go into the 5 criteria in the LEED scorecard, it takes some extra training. And they're great, but no one on our staff has that training. And so you need I would say other people would say that, whatever we might say about it, I think that accreditation is really important in the training that goes into it. I cede the floor to the
Gretchen?
woman from College Township.
Well, Laurel has her hand up too. I don't know.
You haven't spoken yet.
But I'll go first. Okay. There were just 2 things after listening to everybody, because I spoke a lot about this at the last meeting, so people know what my thoughts are. But just one thing was in response to Carlene's question, and I mean I agree, and that's my understanding as well. What Amber's answer was to that, and then in addition to that. I've had some lengthy conversations with previous board members who were a part of that resolution, creating that resolution, and then also with Peter, who, I mean, you've done LEED trainings and stuff, right?
I just signed up for the...
Yeah, so who knows more about it than I do, I would say. I think that's fair. And from my understanding, the verification process, especially after looking at, and I said this last time, but I'm just going to say it again, where I guess Mike had written, well, we would do the equivalent of what the lead criteria are by doing this. And then it really looked like he was choosing what to emphasize and what to leave out. And like, well, we don't have to worry about XYZ because of the nature of this project being this. And so it looked like sort of cafeteria style lead. Like if you go back to the last agenda from our last meeting when this was, I guess, for information discussion, I believe, you can see like it's highlighted in red, I think, of what he chose to say, oh, we don't need that part, but we need this part. And it was really obvious to me that, again, he was, picking and choosing in order to say, we are planning on doing the equivalent of LEED Silver, I think is what he said. But I personally don't have enough background to say, well, it is the equivalent or it's not the equivalent. And that's the whole point of the 2008 resolution, is that the LEED people do have that. And so as a board member, I don't have that. But Mike doesn't have that, and he has, a lot of other knowledge, and I respect him 100%. But just in terms of the whole point of what LEED certification means, and then the picking and choosing, which again, it's really clear if you go look at the last agenda item from the last meeting, you can see what was chosen and what wasn't chosen to be the equivalent of LEED Silver. So that was number one. And then the number two thing I wanted to mention is just in terms of a lot has been discussed about timing and how we don't want to leave those students out to dry, and so we want to make this go faster. And I just want to point out that those programs have been in Fairmount for a long time, and everybody has known for a long time that they need to get out. And that's been at least since I started to pay attention to the happenings of the school district, which is over 10 years now. And so it's just hard to swallow this argument like, oh, got to do it now. Okay, I'm done. Thanks.
Laurel?
Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet want to speak first? I'll go after you. Couple things. First of all, I appreciate the transparency of this. As to the idea of whether a policy and a resolution are the same, we had a resolution on calendars that was systematically ignored year after year after year. I don't think that would have happened if it had been policy. This is a different time than 2008. I appreciate the thinking that went into it, and I appreciate you bringing the question to us because it at least addresses that we have a standard that we have set in the past, and do we want to keep with it or whatever. So just thank you for that transparency. Just quick to run down my list. When you come, this is not to actually build a building, we still need to come to bid. When you bring those things forward and along the way, when you bring updates to us, I think it would be very helpful to see an actual checklist if we decide not to do a LEEDS process. So a question I have is, suppose we decide...
Sorry, could you repeat that, please?
So we saw the checklist, the one you alluded to that had the red on it. The more that can be provided in terms of these are what we have done, the transparency that was talked about with the LEEDS process, that it says that, I think that would be very helpful. And my question is, if we decide not to pass this resolution, to say you can proceed at this point without LEED, presumably if we then later decide we want LEED, we have to back up. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, so if we didn't see something that made us feel the spirit was being followed, that's always an option we have until we go out to bid. I agree with the comment about time in that penny wise and pound foolish. I think it's also sort of, there's an equivalent in there. I'm a fan of alternative certifications. I really am, because sometimes certifications are just there for barriers and that have outgrown their usefulness. I'm not saying that about LEED, but it does not concern me that we might be using a different way of getting at things, because sometimes that makes perfect sense. And I think the cafeteria style comment was made, But my impression is that's sort of what LEAD is. That's how you add up the points, is you do this or this or this, and it adds up, but you don't necessarily do absolutely everything on every line. Am I right about that?
It's my understanding, but I have not had a lot of experience and exposure to it, but that's my feeble understanding.
Well,
And,
then my
Laurel,
last
I meant
point-
like beyond that though. Like,
Okay.
yeah, like even stuff, like it was like, an example would be, we're gonna do this and that means this, but it doesn't necessarily. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So my last thing that I wanted to say is I think we should look into having someone on our staff do some professional development so that we actually have a lead trade person on our staff.
Yep.
I think that would really be helpful. We have other projects in our future. I'd like to see that. Also, the last
Ditto.
thing, the last thing is there is a difference between these two motions. And that affects my vote. I'm concerned about how quickly this physical plant building has appeared. I do very much appreciate your very thorough explanation of why and how and why this location. And that makes a big difference to me because, to me, slowing things down actually had some advantage when I felt we were rushing and had not thoroughly discussed how we got here.
Jackie.
I'm last again. I'm gonna be first to vote. I know it.
Earlier though. First earlier.
This is taking up a lot of space in my head, and so I just want everyone to know, like, I've been thinking about it a lot and talking a lot with everyone about it. And I've like waffle. Like one day I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do one thing, the next day I'm pretty sure I'm gonna do the other thing. And so I've pretty much decided that I have no reason to not follow the administrative recommendation at this point. Since I myself cannot come to a very well-informed decision that I feel certain of. So I am going to follow the administrative recommendation on this one.
Okay.
Can I say?
Oh, sure, yeah.
We brought it forward as a recommendation in response to the resolution. I think that there is some differences in understanding about a resolution versus a policy, and I would recommend that the next time that you have, that in the future, near future, you have the solicitor explain that to the board, so that can be cleared up. Our recommendation came from the fact that Mike, working with our design team of our architects and engineers, who are well-skilled in the LEED certification process, and who have admitted that as they go into the design, if they believe that they cannot complete that process, they will then refer us to another firm. I think that that's very respectful and admirable, and I appreciate that. The administration has never professed that we have the ability to do this. Mike has had some experience. I have had some exposure in building this process. And yes, I do understand it to be a cafeteria process. Some could pick it as, we're going to do this and we're not going to do that. An example, we may do solar panels, we may not, depending on the site. But in this process, because this site location is in a fairly downtown setting, where there is lots of mass transit and there are public sidewalks, we get a lot of points very quickly without even us doing a darn thing and spending $1. So it's not picking and choosing, but it's taking advantage of the opportunities that are before us.
And I think you look at what's the return on investment for specific strategies.
That we are spending money on, absolutely. We wanted to bring it forward as a recommendation because we found it to be a cost savings measure more than a time savings measure, but time savings was also part of the factor. We will do whatever the board wants us to do. As far as having a lead member on our staff, I think that deserves more conversation because I'm not sure that we have enough projects that would warrant that additional training and expertise. That's what our our architects and engineers that we hire, and in some cases, our contract managers, construction managers would be for. So I believe if my memory serves me correctly, and it's now been several years since we've had very long, tedious meetings and discussions about a building project, but I can see that coming in our future, even if it's not a $140 million high school, based upon these discussions. But again, I remember Jeff Straub sitting here and going through those lead checklists.
Yep.
And maybe it wouldn't warrant bringing someone from our firms for these projects because Mike could understand them and they are not as complex. But I trust that Mike can interpret from those individuals and share that information, whether there is a certification process or not. So I just wanted to share those thoughts with you from an administrative standpoint.
Thanks, Randy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, is there any public comment on this item? Okay, yeah, if you'd like to just come to the podium and if you could introduce yourself and your relationship to the district.
Good evening. My name is Omari Patterson, resident of Ferguson Township, and one young child in 6th grade and another one that'll be in kindergarten next year. So, good. Excellent. So, you guys may want to punt for a month on this. I don't know if that's going to make a difference to this time scale that doesn't exist yet, but you may want to punt a little bit. Because I hear kind of the understandings of several aren't quite aligned. I don't think there's a shared basis of knowledge that you all have. So you may want to take a little time to get there on here are the shared kind of facts on what LEAD is, what the numbers are, how do you get to silver, and just everybody look at the spreadsheet, just 5 minutes, 10 minutes. And then once you get there, then it's, well, this is stupid, or it's great, depending on how you feel about it. I think an analogy is the building code that we all live in today. The property where we live was based on a building code that existed whenever it was built. And that code was established by a group that said, hey, we're going to build this thing, or here's the minimum, the worst possible building you can build. And that code has gotten better over time. Meaning, someone's house was built in 75 was not built under the same code as the one built in 2020 or 2015 or even 2000. So it's been improving over time. And what I hear is that in 2008, this board, irrespective of who was there, said, hey, we want to establish our building code for our students, on substantive projects, right, over $1 million or large amount there. And it sounds really neat and a really good from an aspirational perspective. And I think where, bringing all the parts and pieces together, do it every single time. But let me offer in closing that when we're talking about this certification, there's some things that you guys have not talked about that I think will be very helpful. And it's, I think you touched on it, sir, a little earlier, the architect that you're using in this project. How early are you bringing them on? How adept they are with the certification process, that they have this down in spades. They have somebody on the team that as you're throwing out ideas, they're like, oh, yep, you're already there, right? Have you identified your contractor? Are you able to bring on a contractor a little bit earlier that has done this before, that can kind of throw out some, oh man, we've done these on these single-story boxes. We have that in spades, this kind of water collection system, panels here, whatever else, 7 things we can bring to bear. And then do you guys have an owner's rep that also has that certification, that understanding of the process that can help shepherd it? So when you talk about schedule, those 3 things together can kind of help condense and keep it on time, on budget, within schedule, while adhering to this new code that was established by the board in 2008. So good luck with your decision.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, just point of clarification, we're not able to bring general contractors into the process. At this point, we have to put, big public projects you have to put out to bid. So that's down the road after everything's been designed. and goes out to bid, that's when a general contractor comes on the scene, so.
It's not in our control.
Yeah, because of the public project bidding process prescribed by law, so.
Yeah, there's I don't know about State College, but there's like public-private partnerships maybe you can explore.
It's very constrained, so, thank you though for your comments. Yeah, definitely. Yeah. Okay, any other public comment from anyone online? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
And what is yes, what does it mean?
Okay, so the motion
Yes-
was
yes or no
to
means what?
require the lead certification, so a yes is to require, a no is to waive it.
For the facilities.
For the physical
Facility
plant building.
Plant building.
Yeah, this is just, pardon?
To approve the lead process for the physical plant building.
And a no is to go with the administration's recommendation.
Correct. Well,
A no is to waive the requirement. of
to
the-
waive the requirement.
Administrative recommendation.
I think we'd have to have another motion if this one didn't pass.
We would, yeah.
Yeah.
Yes.
So no just means you're not approving.
The no means you're not voting to require the lead certification. A yes means you are voting to require. Okay. Thank you.
No.
Ms. Zidney,
No.
Dr. Anderson,
No.
Dr. Bader,
No.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
No.
Dr. Duffy.
Yes.
Okay, so that motion failed. Does somebody want to make an alternative motion?
I move to waive the lead certification for the physical plant building project.
Second.
Okay, so that's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on that item? Any public comment on that? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Ms. Zidney,
Yes.
Dr. Anderson,
Yes.
Dr. Bader,
Yes.
Ms. Brandt,
No.
Dr. Buck,
No.
Concepcion,
No.
Dr. Crevecore,
Yes.
Dr. Duffy,
No.
Ms. Huff.
Yes.
Okay, so the motion passed to waive the lead certification for the physical plant building project. Then moving on to item I, could we have a motion either to authorize or to waive the lead certification for the North CTC building renovation as shown in attachment 6I?
I move that we authorize the the lead certification for the CTC.
Second.
Okay, so it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion around this item? Laurel?
I was fortunate to attend one of our CAC meetings, and they drew a real distinction that I follow, and it was brought up in committee too, that there may be differences when we are talking about buildings that are primarily inhabited by our students for educational purposes, which this building will be, compared to the physical plant building, which, while an important building, has a different educational type of educational mission. The other thing that makes this project different is that it is a small percentage of a very huge project, which was all done with LEED certification. And to me, though we can do renovations without it, this is more than a minor renovation. And to me, it makes sense to keep the building of a piece, given that it has already been through the LEED process.
Any other commentary? Any public comment?
Can I just ask one
I'm sorry.
question, though?
Yes.
So if we don't do LEED certification for the CTC renovation, does that jeopardize the LEED certification for the Delta building?
Mm-mm.
No.
Okay. So it can be considered separate? Thank you.
Any public comment on this item? Okay, we'll have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Anderson,
No.
Dr. Bader,
No.
Ms. Brandt,
Yes.
Dr. Buck,
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion,
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore,
No.
Dr. Duffy,
Yes.
Ms. Huff,
No.
Ms. Zidney.
Yes.
Okay, so that item has passed. All right. Thanks, Randy.
Thanks, Randy.
Thank you. It's not 1 in the morning, you're doing well.
I'm sorry.
Right.
It's not 1 in the morning
It's not
yet,
midnight.
so.
Good to know. Thank you. Okay. Item J on our agenda is a motion to approve the MOU with State College Area Educational Support Personnel Association. This is shown in attachment 6J.
Moved, Bader.
Second, Crevecore.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. Any questions or discussions on this item? I mean, it was on there when I read the agenda. but-
You know what, Laurel, when I read it online, it was on, but when I printed it, it wasn't. So,
Okay.
yeah, sort of funky.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Could you just repeat the motion? I'm sorry about that. I got confused by the.
Should we, why don't we take our 5-minute break before this item then, instead of after it? How about that?
Cool.
Sure, okay?
Cool.
All right, we will take a 5-minute break for freshening up. So.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
All right, I'm going to call the meeting back to order. And that we're on item J on the agenda. It's a motion to approve an MOU with State College Area Educational Support Personnel Association as shown in attachment 6J.
Huff, so moved.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. So questions and discussion on this item. Okay.
Appreciate that we're continuing to do what we need to do to make sure we have appropriateness of that
Yep.
in our building.
Mm-hmm.
I forgot to turn on.
Any public comment on this item? Okay, we will have a roll call vote then.
Dr. Bader?
Yes.
Ms. Brandt?
Yes.
Dr. Buck?
Yes.
Ms. Concepcion?
Yes.
Dr. Crevecore? Yes. Dr. Duffy?
Yes.
Ms. Huff?
Yes.
Ms. Zidney?
Yes.
Dr. Anderson?
Yes.
Okay, that item is passed. Thank you. So moving on to information discussion, our only item in this category tonight is looking at the solar power purchase agreement. We have an update on that. It's shown in attachment 7A.
All right. Randy, you're going to do the slides. Thank you very much. So once I'll just, while he's
Do you want to
getting ready. Yeah. I'll just
introduce where we are? Yeah.
Yeah, so we're just going to talk briefly here about the request for proposals for the solar power purchase agreement, which just went out last month. And we know that there have been questions that have come in. I don't have the most updated number of questions that have come in from firms, but we had 5, I believe, last week.
I did not check today to see if there was any additional.
There are any additional. But so we know that there is interest out there in the market for bidders on the solar power purchase agreement or retail sleeved product. So yeah, we'll just go through what was just up on the screen, and we've been using this graphic. It's as important for the public as it is for you, just to have some transparency around the process for the solar project. So, early on, we looked at whether or not it was possible that we could procure solar power. We found similar partners in order to aggregate the power, and obviously, obviously to me, because I was there at the very, very, very beginning, but maybe not to members of the public, that this project came from, basically was birthed by the Penn State project that garnered prices that beat the price of the dirty grid, and that if there were an economy of scale that could be reached through intergovernmental cooperation to supply electricity for our operational needs, that if those prices could come in from a renewable electricity agreement that we could meet multiple goals. And so we were able to put together the group, put the band together, as we might say, then set up some goals, and then draft and distribute a request for proposals, which is where we are on that timeline. Just so that members of the public know, we have not received bids, nothing has been evaluated, and there has been absolutely nothing signed with any electricity provider at all. Okay? So we are still somewhere in the middle, but we have achieved an important milestone by putting the request for proposals out. Next slide. So the why, the who, I've addressed a little bit about this, the what and the how. Go ahead. So I think it's important, especially for members of the public, to understand that the group came together and formed these guiding principles about aggregating power in order to try to achieve more competitive rates and aggregate, pool, right, put together purchasing power that, given the price volatility in electricity markets and energy markets, that we might be able to hedge for some exposure, as well as meeting sustainability and climate goals, contribute to the global effort to mitigate the risks of climate change. We are in a region that has adopted a pretty aggressive climate action and adaptation plan, promote solar market prosperity here, educate constituents, also promote diversity in the energy grid and reducing dependence on fossil fuels, and then finally provide structures. Well, this would be if it were in our facilities, but given that, so sorry, I should read that last thing so that people in the public don't think I'm just skipping something. Provide structures aesthetically compatible with the facilities surrounding neighborhoods. So were there to have been a project that would have been possible in the center region, that we would perhaps do something where we would have more aesthetic control. That still can be part of MOUs, memoranda of understanding with developers, but given that it's not going to be in our neighborhood, or very, very unlikely to be, that probably doesn't.
And unlikely to be in any neighborhood per se, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. Here. So these are just the members of the 15 entities that have participated.
Yeah.
So CATA, the Housing Authority. So there are 6 authorities here in this group. There are the 6 municipalities of the Center Region Council of Governments. There's the Center Region Council of Governments itself, the Center County Government, and the State College Area School District. And as has been said in previous board meetings, the State College Area School District is easily the single largest purchaser of electricity in this group by a pretty significant amount.
I don't remember the number, but yes.
Yeah, it's 14.5 million kilowatt hours out of 32.5 million kilowatt hours. So you do the math, somewhere around 40-ish%.
Yeah, we're 40-ish%. I don't remember. What I don't remember is who's the next highest user, and what their percentage is. But yes, we are in the 40% range.
I think it's CATA or the Borough Water Authority, and
I think you're
we
right.
have like 3 or 4 times as much. Lots of pumps in water authorities.
Yep.
Right. So in order to create and draft a project that could go out to bid, we formed a project management team. This was over a year ago, right? This is quite over a year ago, in order to handle this process. And Randy is the main staff person who keeps us on track and coordinates our meetings. But Gretchen and I have served on it, as well as Jason Grotini from the Water Authority, who's also a renewable energy professional, Bruce Donovan at CATA, and Larry Pager and John Franek are both also business folks and administrators, and then Pam Adams is the sustainability planner at the Center Region Council of Governments. And we work with Green Sky, the energy services consultant headed by Greg Shively. I would say that he is a wealth of information, has been very helpful in our meetings, and has helped us draft everything that we've done and answered all of our questions. Any questions that we are unable to answer, he most certainly can. So he helped us review a request for information and actually, I believe, drafted it and conducted it. So we have reviewed those. We have weekly meetings on Wednesdays, and yeah, we're on task, and we are prepared to review the request for proposals for the power purchase agreement or sleeve product when it comes in.
And I would be remiss if I didn't share how much I value Pam Adams and Joe Viglione from COG. They have been a tremendous help with a lot of these processes as well.
Yeah, and Keith Dingwall is from State College Area
right.
School District, is also direct support for Randy and helps us get numbers as well. Yep, really, really good. So our key points are that when the proposals come in, the project management team will be reviewing them, and we will recommend one proposal over the others. Each entity, so the district is going to have its own agreement. It will not be the same agreement that Patton Township has or the Borough Water Authority has or whoever. We're all going to have to do that alone because that's the nature of our contracts. Were you going to ask something?
Yeah, so when you say you'll recommend one proposal for all, so essentially probably the same vendor, we would be making separate agreements with the same vendor.
That's right. So if, you know, Bob's Solar came in as number one, we would say, everybody, you should go with Bob's Solar. I hope that there is not a Bob Solar. That's like a bad cartoon. So we do expect that the price that will come in will be lower than the current market. And so, for example, Ferguson Township just is having to go out for electricity. And I talked with their township manager. They are at 11 point something cents per kilowatt hour. Our most recent electricity price in our contract was at about 5.
Between 4 and 5 cents.
Yeah. So
That's where the market might be heading.
So and we don't have it in this, but there's also a projection in PJM that the electricity price goes up to 16 or 17 cents in early 2023. Now that hasn't happened yet, but so far the trend line has been tracking with the predictions. PJM is our grid, Pennsylvania, Jersey, Maryland, but it goes from North Carolina to the New York border and over into parts of Illinois and Michigan. So we expect that the price will come in. Having seen some other prices, they are tending to come in the low 5s around the scale that we're talking about. So the term options that we've put out there are for 5, 15, 25 years. And then that the renewable energy credits, which are the non-electricity assets of basically the avoided carbon emissions of the project, those can be sold. And so every organization will have to decide what they do with those. And we will need to, if you want to move to the next slide, decide what we're going to do. We need this to align with our electricity contract at its sunset. So I know we had a little bit of discussion. I remember Dr. Anderson had asked some questions about the first set of ranking and the second set of ranking, and there are some differences between whether we work directly with a solar developer in a power purchase agreement, right? They would be the owner operator, or whether we work with a retail supplier who basically goes out and looks for a project for us and manages some of that risk. So we could get all of the projects on the left and then never have to deal with a retail service contract, or we could have a bunch that are only on the right, or we might have a little bit of column A and a little bit of column B, and then have to go through the process. So obviously pricing in term, that's the biggest, right? We know that our taxpayers or ratepayers, if you're an authority, they want to make sure that you're not wasting money. and then the experience and qualifications of the firm are really going to matter, because we don't, not to make more jokes about Bob Solar, but if Bob Solar is run out of some disreputable place, no ma'am. So, so we just want to make sure that we have, that we're on good footing in either of those. And then there's a little bit of differences there in column 2. Basically, we'll have some, if I'm channeling Greg correctly, we will have basically enough of an apple-to-apple comparison in order to be able to look at these things and weight them against each other before, if we decide then to go into interviews and conduct interviews after that. So the timeline is on the next screen. And so we released the request for proposals on the 13th of September. So they're out there, like, come solar people, provide us with proposals. And, you know, by the 9th of November, we would select the top 3 and then conduct interviews following that. And if there's a project that we think should be considered, then we would make that recommendation. And if there isn't, then we won't. So I think that is.
And if you remember, I think I mentioned at a previous meeting that we were only scheduled to have one meeting in January, but I asked you for a second meeting because I just felt that, given all of our timelines, that we might need that additional meeting for this purpose, especially.
Right. And so the next slide, yeah. So the project management team will continue to be studying energy markets to understand the long-term commitment, what projections are. We've had, I've reached out to the Facilities Engineering Institute to just so that we can have another set of eyes talk about the market. So someone who we're not necessarily paying, and they work with governments, they work with the General Services Administration for the state, for example. Also, what we're going to consider to do with our renewable energy credits, and there are some recommendations around that. I mean, we could answer something about that tonight or dive into a little more on Thursday's Facilities Committee meeting in order to come back with a recommendation. And then also any questions, you know. I just moved through this fairly quickly. Folks may have questions. So we will be having this on the agenda on the Thursday Facilities and Grounds Committee. So, you know, if folks have questions they want to put on the table now, and we can just take them down, answer them super quickly, or just carry them into the Facilities Committee and pose them to Greg, whatever works. So, Randy, do you have anything that you want to add? Or?
I do not.
Questions? It was thorough.
Go team.
Okay, great.
I certainly appreciate your leadership on this, Peter, and also Gretchen and Randy. I mean, it really is. It's incredibly valuable, and certainly it represents a level of study and preparation which would take me years to accomplish.
It has taken years. Yeah.
But I really do think that bears mentioning. So thank you very much.
Agreed. Gretchen?
I just wanted to add, just in case anybody has any questions that comes up for you between now and Thursday's meeting, or after that too, but to go ahead and email them if you're not planning on being able to attend that meeting, and that no question is stupid, because this is a lot of information, and I think sometimes I've noticed, not in this board particularly, but you know, they'll like call me aside in the parking lot and ask me a question because they didn't want to say it in front of people. But this is so much information that there really is no stupid question. So any questions, I think, are completely relevant. So please do that. If nothing pops into your mind tonight, then, but it does between now and then go for it, because we really love questions.
And interested members of the public obviously are also welcome to ask questions about it too. So feel free.
I think I'm going to have questions about the recs, but I don't have to do those in a meeting. But
I have lots of questions about the Rex.
Rex.
I should go study before I spend anyone else's time, probably.
Okay.
All right.
Thanks,
Thank
Randy.
you. Yeah, thank you.
Bolosaurus Rex.
Yes. All right. So, board committee reports. Dan, Culture, Climate, and Learning.
Much of what we discussed this evening was
Totally.
presented during CCL. The one piece that was, in addition to our topics this evening, that was worthy of discussion and was presented was the question about security staff and how we're funding security staff and the training for the contracted security staff, and how that relates to other security staff that we have within the school district. Obviously the SROs, but also the contracted security help assigned security people who work alongside the contractors. And so there was a fairly significant discussion about that. And not in a way that was leading to a particular recommendation to the board as much as it was to inform us about how these things operate.
Yeah, that was helpful. Okay, so looking forward, we have board committee meetings on the 6th and the 12th of this month, and then our next regular meeting on the 17th. With that, I'll be looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Second.
Okay, that's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Then we are adjourned.
You're watching CNET, Center County's Government and Educational Access Network.
The Patton Township Housing Task Force is continuing to research housing. The pandemic has deepened a housing crisis that confronts communities nationwide. Meeting the challenge in Patton Township requires that we seize this moment to work together to make Patton Township a place for all, a vibrant community where we live, work, and play together. A community where businesses can thrive and employees can find housing that is affordable for them. A welcoming community for all families, including single parents and their children. An elder-friendly community where seniors can afford to stay in the community they helped build. It will take all of us to make Patton Township a place for all. When the Patton Township Housing Task Force formed in early 2021, the housing challenge was already concerning, and unfortunately, it has only worsened. Patton Township is striving to alleviate the attainable housing challenge, and it is also seeking to become a community that values diversity, equity, and inclusion. At the end of 2021, the task force took its report to the Patton Township Board of Supervisors. Recommendations include allowing accessory dwelling units that could act as naturally occurring affordable housing seamlessly integrated into existing neighborhoods, as well as expanding areas where duplexes are allowed. Reducing parking minimums to save on development costs that would typically be passed on to buyers or renters, and adopting inclusionary zoning regulations to gain new affordable units with new land development projects. The objective is to make changes that will diversify housing and better utilize existing infrastructure so that housing is attainable for people at various income levels, life stages, and abilities. Maybe you or someone you care about has struggled with attaining housing. Consider this your call to action to become part of the Patton Township Housing Task Force as it continues to seize the opportunity to learn and to see its housing recommendations implemented. To get involved, visit the township's new website, which now gives you the ability to sign up for alerts. On the homepage, you will see there is an option to create an account. This allows for a more custom experience. There is also a button on the main page called Alert Sign Up that will lead you to a page named Notify Me. This feature will allow you to select which email lists, meetings, and so on you would like to be emailed about, and you may sign up for text alerts as well. You are also encouraged to follow the township on social media. Look for @Patton Township on Facebook and Instagram. The links are easily accessible on the website homepage too. Together, let's make Patton Township a place for all. Visit our webpage for all the videos in our series, the 2021 Patton Township Housing Task Force Report, and more information.